She insisted on absolute privacy, excellent school grades, and trusted no outsiders of either race. We were instructed never to reveal details of our home life to any figures of authority teachers, social workers, cops, doorkeepers, or even friends. If anyone asked us about our home life, we were taught to respond with, I don't know. And for years, I did just that. Mommy's house was an entire world that she created. She appointed the eldest child at home to be king or queen, to run the house in her absence, and we took it from there, creating court jesters, slaves, musicians, poets, pets, and clowns. Playing in the street was discouraged and often forbidden, and if you did manage to slip out, get your butt in this house before dark, she would warn, a rule she enforced to the bone. I often played that rule out to its very edge, stealing to the house at dusk, just as the last glimmer of sunlight was peeking over the western horizon, closing the door very softly, hoping Mommy had gone to work, only to turn around and find her standing right before me, hands on hips, whipping belt in hand, eyes flickering angrily back and forth to the window and then at me, lips pursed, trying to decide whether it was light or dark outside. It's still light, I would suggest, my voice wavering as my siblings gathered behind her to watch the impending slaughter. That looks light to you? She'd snap, motioning to the window. Looks pretty dark, my siblings would chirp from behind her. It's definitely dark, Ma. They'd shout, stiffing their giggles. If I was lucky, a baby would wail in another room, and she'd be off, hanging the belt on the doorknob as she went. Don't do it again, she'd warn over her shoulder, and I was a free man. But even if she had any interest in Black Power, she had no time to talk about it. She worked the swing shift at Chase Manhattan Bank as a typist, leaving home at 3 p.m. and returning around 2 a.m. So she had little time for games, and even less time for identity crisis. She and my father brought a curious blend of Jewish, European, and African American distrust and paranoia into our house. Our mixed family. He always made sure his kids never got in trouble, was concerned about money, and trusted the providence of the Holy Father to do the rest. After he died and Mommy remarried, my stepfather, Hunter Jordan, seemed to pick up where my father left off, insisted on education and church. On the other end, Mommy had no model for raising us other than the experience of her own Orthodox Jewish family, which, despite the seeming flaws, an unbending nature, a stridency, a focus on money, a deep distrust of all outsiders, not to mention her father's tyranny, represented the best and the worst of the immigrant mentality. Hard work, no nonsense, quest for excellence, distrust for authority figures, and a deep belief in God and education. My parents were non materialistic. They believed that money without knowledge was worthless, and education tempered with religion was the way to climb out of poverty in America. And over the years, they were proven right. Yet, conflict was a part of our lives, written into our faces, hands, and arms. And to see how a contradiction lived and survived in its essence, we had to look no farther than our own mother. Mommy's contradictions crashed and slammed against one another like bumper cars on Cluny Island. White folks, she felt, were implicitly evil towards blacks, yet she forced us to go to white schools to get the best education. Blacks could be trusted more, but anything involving blacks was probably slightly substandard. She disliked people with money, yet was in constant need of it. She couldn't stand racists of either color and had great distaste for bougie blacks who sought to emulate rich whites by putting on airs and doing silly things like covering their couches with plastics and holding teacups with their pinkies out. What fools, she hissed. She wouldn't be bothered with parents who bragged about their children's accomplishments, yet she insisted we'd strive for the highest professional goals. She was against welfare and never applied for it despite our need, but championed those who availed themselves to it. She hated restaurants and would not enter one even if the meals served were free. She actually preferred to be among the poor, the working class poor of the Red Hook housing projects in Brooklyn, the cement mixers, bakers, donut makers, grandmothers, and soul food church partisans who were her long life friends. It was with them that she and my father started to live New Brown Memorial Baptist Church, a small storefront church which still stands in Red Hook today. Mommy loves the church and to this day still loves Red Hook, one of the most dangerous and neglected housing projects in New York City. On any given day, she'll get up in the morning, take a New Jersey Transit train from her home to Ewing, New Jersey on Manhattan, and then take the subway to Brooklyn and wander around the projects like the Pope, the only white person in sight, waving to friends, stepping past the drug addicts, smiling at the young mothers pushing their children in baby carriages, slipping into the poorly lit hallway of 80 Dwight Street while the young Judes in hooded sweatshirts stare barefully at a strange, bow-legged old white lady in Nikes and red sweats who slowly hobbles up the 3 flights of dark, urine-smelling stairs and arthritic knees to visit her best friend, Miss Ingram, in apartment 3G. As a boy, I often found Mommy's ease among black people surprising. Most white folks I knew seemed to have a great fear of blacks. Even as a young child, I was aware of that. I'd read it in the paper, between the lines of my favorite sport columnists in the New York Post and the old Long Island Press. In their refusal to call Cassius Clay Muhammad Ali and their portrayal of Floyd Patterson as a good Negro Catholic, and it was burning criticism of black athletes like Bob Gibson of the Street Louis Cardigans, whom I idolized. In fact, I didn't even have to open the paper to see it. I could see it in the faces of the white people who stared at me and Mommy and my siblings when we rode the subway, sometimes laughing at us, pointing at us, muttering things like, "Look at those little N-words." I remember when a white man shoved her angrily as she led a group of us onto the escalator, but Mommy simply ignored them. I remember 2 black women pointing at us saying, "Look at that white bitch," and a white man screaming at Mommy somewhere in Manhattan, calling her a N-word lover. Mommy ignored all of them, unless the insults threatened her children, at which she would turn and fight back like an alley cat, hissing, angry, and fearless. She had a casual way of ignoring upfronts, sipping past insults to her whiteness like a seasoned boxer sips punches. When Malcolm X was the supposed demon of the white man was killed, I asked her who he was, and she said he was a man ahead of his time. She actually liked Malcolm X. She put him nearly in the same category as her other civil rights heroes, Paul Robeson, Jackie Robinson, Eleanor Roosevelt, A. Philip Randolph, Martin Luther King Jr., and the Kennedys, any Kennedy. When Malcolm X talked about the white devil, Mommy simply felt those references didn't apply to her. She viewed the civil rights achievements of black Americans with pride, as if they were her own. She herself occasionally talked about the white man in the third person, as if she had nothing to do with him. And the fact is, she didn't, since most of her friends and social circle were black women and church. "What's the matter with these white folks?" she'd muse after reading some craziness in the New York Daily News. "They're fighting over this man's money, and now he's dead. None of them wanted him when he was alive, and now look at them. Forget it, honey." This is Mommy talking over the newspaper. "Your husband's dead, okay? He's dead. Poof! You had your chance. This money can bring him back? No." Then she turned to us and delivered an unreviewable lecture. "You don't need money. What's money if your mind is empty? Educate your mind. The world is crazy, or am I the crazy one? It's probably me." Indeed, it probably was. At least I thought so. I knew for one other white woman who would board the subway in Manhattan at 1 o'clock every morning and fall asleep until she got up to her stop, Queens, 45 minutes later. Often I could not sleep until I heard her key hit the door. Her lack of fear and safety, particularly among blacks, where she often stuck out like a sore thumb and seemed like an easy target for muggers, had me stumped. As a grown man, I understand now how her Christian principles and trust in God kept her from going through all her life's battles. But as a boy, my faith was not that strong. Mommy once took me to the Harlem to visit my stepsister, Jacqueline, whom we call Jack, and who's my father's daughter by a previous marriage and more like an aunt than a sister. The two of them sat in Jack's parlor and talked into the night while Jack cooked big plates of soul food, macaroni and cheese, sweet potato pies, and biscuits for us. Take this home to the kids, Ruth, Jack told Ma. We put the food in shopping bags and took it in the subway without incident. But when we got off the bus in St. Albans near the house, two black men came up behind us and one of them grabbed Mommy's purse. The shopping bag was full of macaroni and cheese and sweet potato pies burst open and flew everywhere as Mommy held on to her purse, spinning around in a crazy circle with the muggler, neither saying a word as they both desperately wrestled for the purse, whirling from the sidewalk into the empty street like two ballerinas locked in a death dance. I stood frozen in shock watching. Finally, the mugger got the purse and ran off and his buddy laughed at him, and Mommy fell onto the ground. She got up calmly and took my hand and began to walk home without a word. You okay? She asked me after a few moments. I nodded. I was so frightened I couldn't speak. All the food that Jack cooked for us lay on the ground behind us, ruined. Why didn't you scream? I asked. I finally got my tongue back. It's just a purse, she said. Don't worry about it. Let's just get home. The incident confirmed my fears that Mommy was always in danger. Every summer, we joined the Poor Inner City Kids, the Fresh Air Fund organization sent to host families or to the summer camps for free. The luckier ones among my siblings got to stay with host families, but I had to go to camps where the housed 10 of us in the cabin for 2 weeks at a time. Sometimes they seemed closer to prison or Job Corps in a camp. Kids fought all the time. The food was horrible. I was constantly fighting. Kids called me Koshais because of my light skin and curly hair. Despite all that, I loved it. Once the home of middle-class whites and Jews like playwright Neil Simon, but long since turned black, and it seemed that the only white person for miles was my own mother. The camp organizers set up a table inside where they removed our shoes and shirt and inspected our toes for athlete's foot, checked us for measles and chicken pox, then sent us outside to board a yellow bus for a long journey to upstate New York. As I sat on the bus peering out the window at Mommy, the only white face in the sea of black faces, a black man walked up with his son. He had a mustache and a goatee and wore black leather pants, a black leather jacket, a ton of jewelry, and a black beret. He seemed outstandingly cool. His kid was very handsome, well dressed, and quite refined. He placed his kid's bag in the back of the bus, and when the kid went to step on the bus, instead of hugging the child, the father offered his hand. The father and his son did a magnificent, convoluted Black Power soul handshake called the DAP. The kind of handshake that lasts 5 minutes, fingers looping, thumbs up, thumbs down, index fingers collapsing, wrist snapping, bracelets tingling. It seemed incredibly hip. The whole bus watched. Finally, the kid staggered breathlessly onto the bus and sat behind me, tapping the window and waving at his father, who was standing next to Mommy, waving at his kid. Where'd you learn that handshake? Someone asked the kid. My father taught me. he said proudly. He's a Black Panther. The bus roared to life, and as I panicked, a Black Panther next to mommy? It would be the worst nightmare come true. I had no idea who the Panthers truly were. I swallowed the media image of them completely. The bus clanked into gear as I got up to open my window. I wanted to warn mommy. Suppose the Black Panther wanted to kill her? The window was stuck. I tried to move to another window. A counselor grabbed me and sat me down. I said, I have to tell my mother something. Write her a letter, he said. I jumped into a seat of the Black Panther's son behind me. His window was open. The counselor placed me back on my seat. Mommy, mommy, I yelled, closed at the closed window. Mommy was waving. The bus pulled away. I shouted, watch for him. But we were too far away and the window was shut. She couldn't hear me. I saw the Black Panther waving at his son. Mommy waved at me. Neither seemed to notice the other. When they were out of sight, I turned to the Black Panther's son sitting behind me and punched him square in the face with my fist. The kid held his jaw and stared at me in shock. His face melted into a knot of disbelief and tears. Do you think Ruth has no relation to the white man? I think that she does, because despite her growing up next to Black people, she has an obvious advantage over her Black counterparts, like her friends and her romantic partners. Also, do you think it was right for James to punch the Black Panther's son in the face? I think that he was too quick to judge.